Just like plenty of gamers over the last few days, we've been running around the snowy plains of Hoth, the dusty wastelands of Tatooine, and the volcanic rocks of Sullust enjoying Star Wars Battlefront. And while the gameplay isn't anything different from what was shown behind closed doors and at conventions, it was the first time EA and DICE were happy to put their shiny new toy in the hands of tens of thousands of useless stormtroopers. But did DICE finally get it right? Has EA buggered up the in-game economy? Are the rebels destined to lose Hoth most of the time? And is it just a game for casuals? We'll cover that and more as we share 5 things we learned from the Battlefront open beta. Number 1. The spawns are a bit of a nightmare. It almost seems like a luxury now, but the last 4 Battlefield releases, Bad Company 2, Hardline and Battlefield 3 and 4, all made the pre-spawn selection screen a major feature of moment-to-moment gameplay. Battlefront is more pared down than that. The UI is more minimalist, the range of gameplay options is simpler. Even the rifles are more basic, with no magazine sizes, recoil, and a very manageable spread. In drop zone managing the spawns is easy because you'll generally be on the opposite side of where you started, unless you spawn on your partner, which might not be that often. Hoth and Walker Assault is far more complicated. As the Empire, you could spawn about a mile away from the action, but you're likely to find a stray ATST, TIE Fighter, or Interceptor power-up that will sort you out. Rebels get a lot less of those, and everybody's lost count in the amount of times they spawned in front of an ATST, or a Stormtrooper firing their blaster at full pelt, or just right in the middle of a firefight. If anything, once a battle moves past the first uplink stations, it's more than likely you'll be spawning in someone's line of sight. It can be a nightmare, but for now, it's a problem that's only limited to Hoth and the Walker Assault mode. There are plenty of other maps and lots of other modes planned for release, but it'll be interesting to see if the rest of Battlefront is equally chaotic. Number 2. DICE's server woes might finally be over. The early tests for press and influencers, that's the market term for YouTubers and people with big social media following, was smooth as butter, but that was to be expected. The real test would be when the origin counter finally ticked down and the doors were open to all and sundry. Those hoping to download on console didn't have the best experience though. Many couldn't find the beta on PSN or Xbox Live at first, and even PC users had a quirk on the first night where there simply weren't enough servers to get a game. But DICE added more servers and that problem quickly faded away. Even then, those who were able to get in didn't have many complaints. There were a few mutterings of rubber banding, but it wasn't the stampede of discontent that plagued Battlefield 4 well after release, and most had very few problems at all. People won't be happy about not being able to see a ping, and the lack of a server browser, after getting accustomed to Battlelog for the last few years, will grate with quite a few. Although, for that crowd, the server browser will be the least of their worries, which brings us to our next point. Number 3. Battlefront isn't like the originals or Battlefield 4, it's more like Bad Company 2. A major worry on most people's mind was whether Battlefront would be a reskinned Battlefield 4. After a few hours, that concern is pretty easy to debunk. It's much more compressed and simplified, with no recoil, no ammo management, fewer vehicles, less of a focus on squads and squad mechanics, and there's no prone. But it's not like the original Battlefront games either. There's no classes, no galactic conquest, vehicles and Jedi or Sith. They're only available through randomly dropped power-ups. There's no NPC forces like the Tusken Raiders or Jawas to complicate matters. And the player count is significantly smaller, with a cap of 40 compared to 64 on PC for the original Battlefront games, although that is more than the 32 players supported by the PS2 and Xbox port. But what the new Battlefront lacks in complexity, it tries to make up in speed. The game is bloody quick, especially if you're playing Drop Zone, Battlefront's pared down take on Rush. There's not much cooldown on abilities either. Take the ATST walkers. They get to fire a barrage of grenades and rockets every 10 seconds, along with regular laser bursts. The thermal detonators aren't so useful on Hoth thanks to the medium to extreme ranges most fights take place on, but on the tighter Sullust they're wonderfully spammable. And the personal shield, while occasionally helpful on Hoth in an emergency, is brilliant for rushing pods and deactivating them, because you've got to melee someone who's in a shield. In short, Battlefront's a lot faster and more chaotic than the previous Battlefield games have ever been. The scale is a little smaller and there's less team mechanics, even if teamwork in general is still a priority, especially as the Rebels. That might not work for a lot of old school Battlefield fans, particularly those frequenting the hardcore servers, and it seems highly unlikely that Battlefront will cater to that crowd at all by release. Number 4. Air superiority is absolutely key. and the Rebels have a lot less to work with. Most will have seen the Rebels win at least a few games, and once you have, it's easy to spot why. The majority of damage to the AT-ATs comes from the air. If you're flying one of the speeders, you can string a cable around the walkers regardless of their health as well. Now those are harder to come by and they're power-ups mostly, but not always. Generally appear when everyone's battling in front of the shield generators. Otherwise, it's typically a battle between TIE fighters, X-Wings, Y-Wings, and the occasional interceptor. Troopers on the ground can contribute too. The ATSTs do good damage against aircraft, and the Cyclone Rifle, which is Battlefront's sniper rifle, is great for taking down TIE fighters. But the real annoyance with Walker Assault, and where most complaints of imbalance are coming from, is that the Rebels typically just spawn and die, and the most they might get access to for the majority of the game is a proximity bomb, a turret, or an infantry shield. There's nowhere near the same level of access to higher firepower afforded to the Empire. Players can often find ATST, AT-AT, TIE Fighter, and even hero power-ups straight off the bat as a Stormtrooper. I had one game where I instantly rolled into an ATST, got 16 kills, respawned, and then had Darth Vader ready and waiting 20 meters away. It's probably a better system than going down the Call of Duty killstreak road, which Battlefront weirdly would be more welcoming of given the greater focus on the individual rather than a squad or your partner as a whole. But while I loathe to tell DICE how they should balance their game, playing defense on Hoth is infinitely more challenging, and potentially more frustrating when you're permanently pinned back. Incidentally, one nice thing about the partner system is that you can use your partner's loadout of cards irrespective of whether you have them unlocked. And you can spawn on them obviously, but otherwise that was the extent of what DICE showed off, and hopefully that system gets used a good deal more. As an aside, the air mechanics have also opened the door for the worst kind of Battlefront player. The one that pops the shield in an X-Wing so they can fly straight into enemy TIE fighters without dying. Jerks. Number 5. Jetpacks are bloody awesome. The original Battlefront games had jetpacks, sure. Jedi could automatically jump and hover a bit, and the jet troopers could hover too. But that was it, and if there were too many jet troopers on your team, then bad luck. And the new Battlefront, DICE treats jetpacks like an Oprah holiday special. After a few levels in, which you can do with a few good runs in an ATST, everyone gets a jetpack. The only way jetpacks could be better is if they had a slightly faster cooldown so I could fly through the air more often. The range is incredible, and it almost adds an advanced warfare or Titanfall-esque touch of movement to proceedings. That breaks things up nicely if you've been stuck in a trench dodging blaster fire, which, let's face it, you'll be doing a lot. It also means people can fly and camp atop the rocks overlooking the early outposts on Hoth, or do dodgy things atop the transport on Sullust. But the Cyclone Rifle recharges fast enough, at least 2 shots before the jetpack comes back, so you'll always have an answer. So that's the end of our experience with the Battlefront beta, and if you're watching this, probably yours too. What'd you learn? Did you have fun? Did the maps work for you? Did you become a good pilot? And how did the servers and lobbies hold up for you? Let us know in the comments on the video or on the site. Just don't kamikaze an X-Wing into our office.